Serious. What is something scary that has happened to you that you cannot explain rationally? In my childhood home, I would often hear touch typing coming from the computer downstairs early in the mornings. I didn't think much of it at first. My parents worked from home, and it wouldn't be uncommon to wake up in the morning to hear mum typing away at the computer. One day I got up and called out to mum, assuming she was down there working, as I could hear typing. No answer. No one was down there at all. I was sure I heard typing. This began happening regularly. I figured I was so used to hearing typing from downstairs that I was hearing things that weren't there, so I didn't mention anything to anyone, figuring I was going a bit crazy. This happened on and off over a period of 6 months. The sound of fast typing and fast, furious clicking of a mouse as if someone was frustrated. One morning, I was eating my breakfast when I heard mum at the top of the stairs call out to me, "You're not down there on that computer already." I froze and ran out to her. I was amazed she had heard it too. She was convinced she could hear typing, yet no one was down there. I told her about all the times I'd been hearing it, and then my sister opened up about hearing it regularly too when no one was down there. I wasn't crazy after all. I set out to try catch whatever was causing it and to try discover a rational explanation for it. I'd sprint out of my bedroom to the top of the stairs, where I was able to look down into the room to see if anyone was at the computer. No such luck. Every time I got there, it stopped. I think it went on for a couple of years, and we learned just to kind of live with it, as it wasn't every day. I was down there once when the ceiling light globe in the center of the room began flashing very fast, strobe-like. It then exploded and glass went shattering all across the room. I was lucky I ran out of the room when it started happening because I was scared, the whole mysterious typing, you know. If I hadn't ran, I would have been hit with bits of light bulb. Around that same time, I was on the computer at home by myself when something happened that resulted in me never being alone in that room again. I felt and heard this really sharp intake of breath directly behind my right shoulder near my ear. I've never ran so fast in my life and was hesitant going in that room ever again. Prior to that, the whole typing thing had just been something weird and a bit spooky, not scary. Still makes my heart race when I think about it today. Have never really encountered anything like this before or since all those events. I don't particularly believe ghosts either, but I'm open to the possibilities of something in which scientists don't have a proper explanation for yet. I used to date a girl in college who lived 3 hours away. We would trade weekends, one at her school, one at my school. One day she got upset because she had driven all the way to see me, and I was in an all-night study session, which she had known about, and couldn't be home to see her. She texted me that she was going back to her place, and then I never heard anything from her ever again. After 3 days of texting her trying to make sure she was okay, the text started coming back as number not found. I sent her the stuff she'd left at my apartment in the mail, and it returned as no forwarding address. Her instant messenger account, which I never messaged but knew the name of, disconnected. And it gets weirder. I called her apartment landline and was told the people who had lived there had moved out. She had 3 roommates and didn't leave a number as to where they went. I got really freaked out and asked friends who worked in school admin to pull some strings just to make sure she was alive. The school she was at didn't have any records of her as a student. The license plate to her car wasn't registered to anyone. None of our mutual friends ever saw her again. I called the police, but there were no car accidents involving anyone who fit her description in the stretch of road between our 2 schools that night, or in the 2 weeks after. I didn't ask for a longer time frame because at that point, she was already missing. Cops wouldn't file a missing person because I wasn't a family member. To this day, I have no idea what happened, why she freaked out on me so bad, or if she's still alive or in witness protection or was erased from all time by an evil wizard. She literally disappeared without a trace. Family moved into an old house, 200 plus years, when I was 10. Uncle, weird guy, was going to help us move in, and when we got inside the house, he got all weird and left. Always avoided coming for birthdays, etc. We always joked he saw a ghost, and for some reason, we nicknamed the ghost Billy. When my little sister started talking, she would say really weird things like asking if we can shut her door at night so she doesn't have to see the boy walking down the hallway. Fleabing creepy. Anyways, we thought she was also just being a big weirdo, so we continued to have this Billy the ghost joke. Something would get misplaced, must be Billy yada yada. A few years later, we ripped up the flooring because we wanted to go back to the original hardwood that had been covered up forever ago by old owners, and if you know anything about old houses, you know they used to insulate the floor with newspaper when newspaper just became a thing. Decided to read some articles for fun, some talking about the first ever refrigerators, really cool things like that. Until we got to the creepy part, a mentally challenged boy named Billy who lived in our home died while playing outside of it. I saw a lot of stuff growing up in that house, but I'm not a huge ghost believer. The newspaper was a fleeting creepy coincidence though, given that for years we had an ongoing Billy the Ghost joke. Uncle also ended up telling us years later that when he pulled into the driveway and was outside of the house, he just got this awful feeling. A week ago tomorrow, October 20th, I came home from class at around 11:30 and no one else was home. I hung out at home for a bit and at 2:30 I was overcome with sleepiness. Being the bum that I am, I laid down in my bed and set a timer on my phone for a 20-minute nap. I fell asleep quickly and after around 5 minutes, I was woken up by my bedroom door opening and had a split second of panic before my dog jumping up onto my bed and laying down next to me. I fell back asleep. After another 5 minutes of sleep, I instantly jolted awake because I was certain there was someone standing next to my bed, behind me. I assumed it was my mother, who would likely be pissed that I was sleeping in the middle of the day. I woke and turned around in one movement and there was no one there. Weird. I checked my phone and had another 8 minutes of sleep left. I went back to sleep only to be woken by my phone ringing. It was my mother. She said that my great aunt, who had been in the hospital after a stroke-like event for a week, had died around 1 o'clock. My mom then said she knew my aunt was going to die today because she had seen a wraith, a sort of ghost, usually warning of someone dying, that morning. My mom is Scottish and very superstitious, but I don't believe in any of that. She said that when she woke up that morning to take my brother to school, she went in my room to see if I was still asleep. She saw a wraith standing next to my bed. My brain soiled itself. I was about 12 years old and staying at my grandparents' house after my aunt's wedding. The house itself wasn't very big and was the same house that my mother and her brother's sisters lived in growing up. After the wedding reception was over, my mom wanted to take me back to my grandparents for the night so all of the adults could go out and get a couple more drinks. When we arrived at the house, my mother and I both could very faintly hear a baby crying with a woman trying to comfort the baby. Now the house isn't very big, so you could hear pretty much any noise in any point of the house. Our initial thoughts were that someone forgot to turn off one of the TVs in the house, so we both walked around the house trying to find the TV that was left on. To our surprise, not a single TV or radio was left on, but the volume of the woman and the baby remained constant. It didn't matter which room we were in, if we were in the basement or in the landing, the volume of the lady and the baby was always the same. This of course scared the fleab out of me, as I never believed in ghosts before this happened, but there was no other explanation for it. Now my mother was a little freaked out as well, but she had a bar to get to. She then just told me that it was nothing and got in her car and left me alone in the ghost house. I immediately turned the TV on with the volume set as high as possible without busting my eardrums. I was exhausted but drank pop to not let my body fall asleep and give this thing an opportunity to attack me. My parents showed up a couple hours later to a kid all wired on sugar just staring at the TV screen. I later told my aunt, who grew up in that house, the story and she was ecstatic. She has always claimed that she heard a woman and baby in that house growing up, but nobody believed her. I used to put in drop ceilings about 4 years back and I was working at North Carolina School for the Deaf. Me and my buddy Kenny went in one Saturday morning to finish a few of the smaller rooms. I took the rooms on one end of the hallway and he took the ones on the other. It was a pretty long hallway with medium-sized rooms, so we knew we wouldn't get it all done that day, but more than usual since no one else was working on Saturday. I'm cutting tile in my first room and I can hear Kenny walking back and forth by the room I'm in. After I finish cutting in the border tiles for the first room, I walked down to the other end of the hall to see how things were coming along, and he proceeded to ask me if I was ever going to get to work, that I had just been making noise or grunting in the room next to him. Now keep in mind that this place was very empty, as in we had the keys and had to unlock it to get in. It all kind of happened really quick, but we both heard something run past the open door, and I swear, I caught a glimpse of something. I have no idea what it was, but every hair on my body stood up and Kenny said, "Leave your stuff and let's get the fleab out of here." It's kind of a locally known thing that school is haunted, but man, I still get goosebumps thinking about that day. I had just moved back to my hometown after attending an art school for 2 years. The only apartment I could find was a really dumpy loft over a warehouse for $50 a month. This was in 1971, way before these kind of apartments were cool. This was cheap even for back then, and though I wondered a bit about that, it wasn't totally out of the norm. It did have tall windows and skylights, so it worked great for a studio. Since it was a loft, it was a big wide open space with the bathroom being the only room. There were two other doors, one to the stairs down to the street and the fire escape door that had one of those fire alarms on it if you go out of it. The bathroom was like a box cubicle with a shower and sink and toilet. I had been living there about a month when one night I woke up and went to use the bathroom. The door had a small slide lock on it, and I always locked it out of habit. Just as I was about to leave, I heard heavy footsteps walk up to the bathroom door, and I watched in horror as the doorknob turned and rattled, shaking the whole door. It was the first time in my life where I was so scared that I actually felt my body go completely numb. I thought for sure that someone had gotten in and I was now going to be in danger. The lock was a little wimpy thing a granny could have broken. The doorknob rattled several more times, then something hit the door really hard. I then heard the footsteps walk away and go down the steps. I heard the door to the street open and close, then silence. I think it took me nearly 30 minutes to get the courage to leave that little bathroom. When I finally did, I turned on every light in the place and went to inspect the door to the street. There were 3 locks on that door, 2 of them could only be locked from the inside, and those were locked. Nothing could have come in or gone out that way. I even checked the fire escape, but it was locked in a similar way. I couldn't sleep the rest of that night. As it turned out, that was the scariest thing to happen in that loft. After that, I would hear footsteps and doors open and close all the time, and a few other not so scary things. That place convinced me and quite a few others that these things were real. I ended up living there for 3 years and would have stayed longer, but the place got sold and the new owners wanted to move into the loft themselves. They only lived there 2 months before moving out. The scaredy cats. So this happened about a month ago. I live alone and it is extremely rare that I ever feel nervous about being alone late at night. Well, one night, I just had this incredibly uneasy feeling. So much in fact that, even though I'm a smoker, I decided not to smoke before bed like usual. I checked the locks on all my windows and doors before going to bed. I laid down in the bed but still couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. I got up and grabbed my pistol, a revolver, and placed it, still in the holster, on my nightstand next to the bed. I eventually fell asleep and all was good. Until I woke up the next morning and noticed my pistol sitting on the dresser. I thought, well, that's weird. I got up and went over to get the gun and realized that all of the bullets were missing. Since I live alone, I always keep it loaded, but the bullets were missing. I went and grabbed the box of ammo from the closet, and exactly 5 shells, the shells I used to load the revolver, were missing. At this point, I'm freaking out, either thinking that I had maybe woke up in the middle of the night and unloaded the gun or something like that. Well, I had to get my day started, so I went and made some coffee. I needed to empty the garbage and took the bag outside to the can. As I start walking around the house, I freeze instantly. All 5 bullets are scattered on the ground on the backside of my house. The weirdest part is that I hadn't left my house at all the previous day, and all the windows were locked when I checked them the night before. This happened years ago when I was around 17. One night I was up late watching TV and fell asleep on the couch. I woke up at around 4:30 a.m. and went to bed. Everything seemed normal. The next morning, my mom asked where I had gone the night before. I was real confused. The night before, she and my dad had been woken up by the sound of the front door of the house closing. They went downstairs at 2 a.m. and looked outside. My car was not in the driveway. They figured that I'd gone to give a drunk friend a ride home or something, so they weren't worried about it. My dad sat on the couch, the same one I had fallen asleep and woken up on, and ate a midnight snack, watched some TV, and went back to bed around 2:30 a.m. We figured out that I had fallen asleep sometime between 12:30 a.m. and 1:30 a.m. because that's when the TV show I remember watching as I drifted off was on. The soles of my feet were extremely dirty, as though I'd been walking around outside with no shoes on. So, I disappeared with my car for a few hours that night. I have absolutely no memory of what happened, and if mom hadn't said anything that morning, I wouldn't have even known it happened. When I was a younger kid, I had a really hard time getting to sleep, and I normally got to bed really late at night. My mom has always been that way too. So, my mom mentioned that she heard something at night and wanted me to stay up a little longer to hear it. I did, it was summer anyway. Fast forward to that night, it's about 1 in the morning. My mom said it usually happens during her nighttime routine, so she told me to sit in the living room and listen while she went to brush her teeth. That's when I heard it. There were footsteps upstairs. You could hear the footsteps start at the window in my parents' room, then walk away towards the other bedroom, baby sister's room. It sounded muffled until the footsteps arrived to the landing of the stairs, then it got louder because the landing was hardwood floor. After a few steps, you would then hear the footsteps on the carpet again when they arrived at my sister's room. But this time, they didn't go all the way to the window. They went to my sister's crib and paused for a moment before continuing back to the window in my parents' room. I listened to this for about 5 to 10 minutes, with the footsteps taking about a minute to go from the window to the crib and back. My mom then came out of the bathroom and said, "I told you I heard something." Well, we then opened the door and it stopped completely for the night, as far as we know at least. The next night I do the same thing and hear it again. So I open up the door and send our dogs up, a German Shepherd and a Border Collie, who get to the top of the stairs and immediately turn around and bolt down the stairs. My stepdad was there that night and quickly ran upstairs after the dogs came down and looked everywhere. There was not a single place he didn't look, there was nothing to be found, and the windows were still locked. Couldn't explain it for years, and the neighbors that moved in after us apparently heard the same footsteps.